Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Tonight we're going to be looking at the fourth chapter of White Fragility because I have nothing better to do with my time. How does race shape the lives of white people? White people, I don't want you to understand me better. I want you to understand yourselves. Your survival has never deepened on your knowledge of white culture. In fact, it requires your ignorance. Now, I'm not going to pronounce the name because I'll pronounce it incorrectly. But Aloyu sounds like the last name. But I don't know who the quote is from. But the idea is that white people, again, don't understand anything about their own culture. And not understanding about their culture keeps them insulated, because that's the idea of the book. To understand how white people become so difficult in conversations about race, we need to understand the underlying foundation of white fragility, how being white shapes our perspective, experiences, and responses. Every aspect of being white discussed in this chapter is shared by virtually all white people in the Western context generally and the U.S. context specifically. At the same time, no person of color in this context can make the same claims. So she's going to say that this is an aspect that whiteness unifies white people, and therefore then a person of color can't make the same claim. Belonging. I was born into a culture which I belonged racially. Indeed, the forces of racism were shaping me before I took my first breath. If I were born in a hospital, regardless of the decade in which I was born, any hospital would be open to me because my parents were white. Again, this goes back to the idea of segregation and the times where people were actually segregated. The statement, though, that that's the case today is incorrect. If my parents attended a childbirth preparation class, the instructor was mostly white. I wonder if she took a look at who attends preparation classes by race and saw whether or not there are some people that are more inclined, or certain races more inclined to sign up for those classes, and other races that don't. And I'm not talking about black, white. I'm talking about if you take a look at French people or Italians or Russians. I'm sure you're going to find a very big difference in terms of those groups that sign up for these types of classes to begin with. The instructor was most likely white. The videos they watched in class most likely depicted white people, and their fellow classmates with whom they built connections and community were also most likely white. When my parents read their birthing manuals and other written materials, the pictures are likely depicted primarily white mothers and fathers, doctors and nurses. If you took a parenting class, the theories and models, child development were based on white racial identity. The doctors and nursing attending my birth were, in all likelihood, white. Although my parents may have been anxious about the birth process, they didn't have to worry about how they would be treated by the hospital staff because of their race. The years of research demonstrating racial discrimination in healthcare assure me that my parents will most likely have been treated well by hospital personnel and to receive a higher caliber of care than they would people of color. The reason why I'm choking on this is that where I live, there is predominant the nurses in the area, in the hospitals, have a large percentage of African Americans that are on the nursing staff in the hospitals I'm at. And I was a number of years ago in the hospital for something was going on, and the majority of my nurses coming in were African American. And I would hate to think that I was sitting in my bed going, oh my God, are these African American nurses going to give me subpar care because of the color of my skin, and I'm not the same color as them? It's infuriating reading this because it is so far from reality. The nurses that worked with me were wonderful. They treated me wonderful. They treated the people next to me wonderful. My roommate in my room was African American. Very nice person. Had a great conversation. There was no issue about he was treated better than me because his skin color matched the color of the nurses that was treating us. The doctor that treated me was Indian. I don't know. He wasn't white. Should I have been worried that he was going to give me subpar care? The notion of this. And again, I understand there was a history that this happened in. I'm not downplaying the historical roots of this. And we watch movies, especially that go back in time, that show you a lot of this that goes on. Absolutely. But it's not what's going on today. And it's sort of pretending like, it's the same way now as it was then. Conversely, the people who cleaned my mother's hospital room, did the laundry, cooked and cleaned the cafeteria, and maintained the facility were most likely people of color. The very context which I entered the world was organized hierarchically by race. Based on the hierarchy, we can predict whether I would survive my birth based upon my race. Well, again, this would go back to a lot of African Americans who are very angry at the notion of abortion, because African Americans utilize abortion at a much higher rate than other races, if she goes by that. And basically, they look at it as a genocide. Now, if you've ever read anything by Margaret Sanger, who was the original arbiter of Planned Parenthood, the idea of it was to get rid of the undesirables. The idea was, actually, she wanted to eradicate, because she was an inherent racist herself, if you know anything about her writing, she was a person that wanted to eradicate the less desirable people in society. And sadly, that number's very, very high. And for people who are African Americans that know this about this, are very upset about this. For her to talk about the survival rate based upon race, based upon the ideology that people have, specifically in reference to this, is really a step in it, and she doesn't realize she did it. As I move through my daily life, my race is unremarkable. I belong when I turn on the TV, read best-selling novels, watch blockbuster movies. You know, I love this because she belongs, but Irish people didn't feel like they belonged for a very long period of time, and certainly some don't today. English who come from England don't always feel like they belong, despite the fact that they're white, but they have the English accent, and there's already a difference. If you ever seen them on TV, you'll see there are many times they get into it with people in America feeling that they're uncouth, and their way that they see the world is very, very different. And Jews, I work with a large percentage of Jews that I work with, don't see themselves as white at all. They don't identify with white culture at all. And this notion that somehow because of the color of their skin, they relate to all these things, like movies, which some of the people I work with don't even watch movies or have a television set in their home, that somehow then they're relating to this culture that they don't relate to, and nor would they. But again, she doesn't care about all that because she only bases it based upon white skin. I belong when I walk past a magazine rack at the grocery store or drive past billboards. Again, depends where you live. Now, very interesting. In the United States, and this is just the nature of what the United States population is. White alone percentage, 76.3. Black or African alone, 13.4. American Indian Alaskan alone, 1.3. Asian, 5.9. Native Hawaiian, 0.2. And then I'm not going to go through the rest of it. You have Hispanic or Latino, 18.5. So the nature of this ideology that she says, wow, the majority of people of the culture, you're going to see more of them. Yes. If I have 100 balls in a bag and I put 70 balls that are blue and I put 30% that are red, I am more likely to pull out a blue ball more often than not. And no, that pun was not intended on purpose. Just hit me while I said it. But changing the color of the balls will make a difference. The yellow ball and green ball. So if I have more yellow balls than green balls, if I have 70% to 30%, I am more likely to pull out more yellow balls. So the nature of this is that all she's saying is that white people make the majority of the country, which is factually true, as I just showed you on the statistic. I belong where I see overwhelming number of white people on the list of the most beautiful. I may feel inadequate in light of my age and weight, but I will belong racially. Yeah, I love that one. Because people that are overweight feel much better about themselves because of the color of their skin. Yes, in all my years of counseling people because of issues of beauty or feeling less than because they were overweight, but they just said, thank God I'm at least... And by the way, just to tell you this, more African Americans see themselves as beautiful being bigger than white people. Now, again, I don't think it's because of race. I think there's a cultural aspect to that and the way that people have decide what beauty is. But that nature that she's saying here, that whew, at least I'm white, is absolutely wrong. there are more white people because of those illusions in terms of the definitions of beauty that actually feel worse about themselves when they don't match it. I think they said that African American women have higher self-esteem on a board than white women do. And in terms of, again, she feels inadequate in light of her age or weight, but I belong racially. For example, in 2017, Singer Rihanna introduced a makeup line for women of all skin colors. Gratitude from women of color poured in. Many of their tweets included the exclamation, "Finally!" These tweets I never had to receive or send. I belong when I look at my teachers, counselors, and classmates. I belong when I learn about the history of my country throughout the year and when I'm shown its heroes and heroines. Now, when she says that, it depends where you're born. One of my favorite songs, Father of Mine. He talks about the idea of his father leaving him at a young age and what it was like to grow up being a scared white boy in a black neighborhood. That's the line in the song. I promise you, the person that wrote that song didn't feel like they belonged in their culture and society. For people that grow up in a place where they don't feel like they belong and they're the outsider, it does not feel good. 8 Mile, Eminem, the movie. Eminem is the outsider. His talent makes him get accepted, but everybody looks at him differently because he's a white boy and he's in a place where he doesn't belong. So this notion that where you grow up, because you always belong as being part of that culture, is just not true. It depends on the situation. Now, these are the heroes and heroines she lists. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Abraham Lincoln. Okay, would agree. Robert E. Lee. Really? American hero. Don't think so. And I realize in the South there are people that still report in the statues of that nature. But in reality, people from the North do not see Robert E. Lee as a hero. Amelia Earhart, Susan B. Anthony, John Glenn, Sally Ride, Louis May Alcott. I belong when I look through my textbook at the pictures of my classroom walls. I belong when I speak to my children, when I talk to their camp counselors, when I consult their doctors and dentists. No matter how I might explain why all these representations are overwhelmingly white, they still shape my identity in the white world and the worldwide. Except she missed a whole bunch of other people. Harriet Tubman, Booker T. Washington, Martin Luther King. These people were not just, oh yeah, we just put them out of history. These were people considered great in history, and you do learn about them. Not only that, but there is the most famous one. There's always when you have to grab something for a piece of information, it just jumps out of your head. And I just had it a second ago. But he was the first spy in American history, African American, James Armistead. Pulled it out. James Armistead was an African American hero who actually the United States would not exist if it wasn't for him. The likelihood is they would have lost the war if it wasn't for the intelligence that he gathered by his infiltration of the British soldiers. So James Armistead was a huge American hero. But again, if you don't learn American history and you don't care about American history, then you have to understand that American history has its bloody noses, it has its problems and issues that were, and it has its amazing things as well. And when you learn all of American history, you get a much better picture than just cherry picking what you like to pick out in order to criticize. In virtually every situation or context deemed normal, neutral, or prestigious in society, I belong racially. I don't even agree with that. You take a look in society at some of the heroes culturally. You have Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player. Muhammad Ali, the greatest boxer probably of all time, or one of, if not the. You have, and again, I know that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar would be up there in terms of discussion, but let's just go with Michael for a minute because he's my personal favorite. Then you have the king of pop, Michael Jackson. Oh, you can claim that he became white. I'm kidding. But the point of the matter is that the nature of what these icons were racial in different ways. Jackie Robinson became famous, I know she quoted it earlier, but not only for breaking the color barrier, he was an excellent player. Hank Aaron. So the nature, Barry Bonds, despite the steroid era, in terms of a player, was just an amazing player. the nature of who the heroes are and what has happened in sports as well as in entertainment, you can't maintain that all these things don't matter and don't have a context where people have embraced. Now, if you go back to 1940s and 1950s and 60s and said, wow, you wouldn't see these people as much, yes, that is, there's truth to that. But even in boxing, Joe Johnson became the boxing champ when it was still illegal for whites and blacks to mix. So the aspect of the nature of things changing, and it did change, is not in this book at all. It's like pretending we're at slavery, and here's slavery, and now we're here, and nothing's changed. And we're exactly the same spot we were when slavery ended, which of course is not true. But there's nothing here about this. And the aspect of lack of belonging, again, if you grew up in New York City, there was no aspect of you don't have a place where you belong. The question is, even racially, you had places that were a representative of you. And we'll go through those numbers a little bit later just to go through this. This belonging is a deep and ever-present feeling that has always been with me. It's interesting. I remember one of my clients telling me the first time, this was a Jewish client, and the first time he went to Israel. And he said, it was the first time I ever felt I belonged somewhere. Well, it makes sense. It was, the Jewish area, Jewish place that there was, Jewish government. He felt like a belonging. He didn't feel belonging like that in America. He felt belonging like that there. And then he moved there. But the nature of that belonging, as he felt, was something different that he didn't feel here. I'm glad that Miss D'Angelo feels a belonging here, in a place where, well, as we said, 76% white across the board. You're going to, okay. But even in that, there's lack of belongings in different neighborhoods, but we'll get to that later. Belonging has settled deep into my conscious. It shapes my daily thoughts and concerns. When I reach out for it in life, what I expect to find. The experience of belonging is so natural that I don't have to think about it. The rare moments in which I don't belong racially come as a surprise. The rare moments I don't belong culturally come as a surprise. I think in New York you have a hard time belonging here because the nature is that most people here are very multicultural in their ideology in general. A surprise that I can either enjoy for its novelty or easily avoid if I find it unsettling. Well, not everybody has that ability, Miss D'Angelo, even though you do. For example, oh boy, I was invited for a retirement party of a white friend. The party was a potluck picnic held in a public park. As I walked down the slope to the picnic shelters, I noticed two parties going on side by side. One gathering was primarily of white people, and the other appeared to be all black people. I experienced a sense of disequilibrium as I approached, and had to choose which party was my friend's. It felt a mild sense of anxiety, and as I considered that I might have to enter the all-black group. Then felt a mild relief and realized that my friend was in the other group. This relief was amplified as I thought that I might have to mistakenly walk over to the black party. I'm confused. The black party is living in all-white culture. Shouldn't they all bow to your whiteness and be able to respect the fact of your privilege? Or maybe the reason why you felt uncomfortable is that you didn't recognize how you would be treated by them, walking into a place and looked at differently. You see, Miss D'Angelo, the nature of that happens to most people more often than not. As I said, if you walk into a mosque and you're not a Muslim and you're sitting there for somebody else or going to there, you're going to feel differently. If you walk into a church and you're not Christian, you're going to feel like out of place and I don't really belong here. If you walk into a synagogue and you've never experienced a service, you're going to feel a little out of place and not know what your belonging is. And because you're not culturally sensitive to these people, you see them as outsiders and different, as opposed to the different cultures, different values, different thoughts. But also, the nature is that you're going to be seen differently. And there are going to sometimes be people that are hostile to you for being different. And sometimes people are going to be really nice to you for being different, depending on the area that you're in and the people that will talk to you. But the more free and open you are to be able to learn about other people's experiences and discussing with them. And the more that you're able to learn from other people and they from you, the better relationship you have. And then you don't see them as much different. You see them much more as the same, which is the exact antithesis of this book. Okay. The relief was amplified as I thought that I might have mistakenly walked over to the black party. All these thoughts and feelings happening in just seconds. But there's a rare moment of racial self-awareness. The mere possibility that I might have to experience not belonging racially was enough to raise racial discomfort. It is rare for me to experience a sense of not belonging racially, and there are usually very temporary, easily avoidable situations. Again, only where you lived. Indeed, throughout my life, I've been warned that I should avoid situations which I might be a racial minority. These situations are often presented as scary, dangerous, or sketchy. Yet, if the environment or situation is viewed as good, nice, and valuable, I can be confident that a white person, that I've been racially belonging there. Now, again, the reason why you felt that way and the reason why that was put to you had nothing to do with the people's race. Had everything to do with the way that people perceive that another person is going to perceive you there. If I walked in to all place where everybody was Japanese, and I was the only person not Japanese, I'm going to get a lot of looks and being stared at. What are you doing here? Who invited you? I don't understand. Doesn't make sense. Out of place. It doesn't mean Japanese people are dangerous or going to hurt me. But there are other places where you could walk into where you'll be perceived that way, and they might want to. Many years ago, I had a client that I would see in one of the projects in an area they used to work on. I used to go to their house, and they would say to me, do not come past this time when the sun starts to go down because it's too dangerous and you're going to have a big chance of something happening. Now, the reason why this client told me that is not because they were white. They weren't. They were black. And they said themselves they wouldn't go out of their apartment past this time because it gets dangerous in their neighborhood. They know and understand their neighborhood, and they recognize the danger. And it wasn't made up. When I used to go to the apartment on the elevator, they used to have signs all the time. If you have information about this person who was murdered, please, there's a reward for this amount of money. And these signs would change weekly or bi-weekly or something of that nature. So these things were going on, and it was dangerous at the times I was going in. But there were safer times and there was less safe times, and not knowing that could be very dangerous. That doesn't make it that you're going to be more a problem. We're going to stop here. Next, I'm going to do the freedom from the burden of race and the freedom of movement, which we will do hopefully tomorrow night. So I hope that you found this helpful. I hope that you liked this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you disagree with anything I said, please tell me in the comments below. And of course, if you haven't, please hit the subscribe button and share the video, especially for people who like this book, because I'd love to hear anybody who could defend these things to me in any way, shape, or form. These seem so egregious and so horrible, and it doesn't help people to get together and learn about each other and respect each other's culture. What it does is create this false identity and these false ideas, and false things do not lead to good things. So I wish you a good night and good mental health.